What is happening, everybody? So this will be a tutorial on how to set up your Sony ZV1 for photography in manual exposure mode. So it's okay to just film in automatic settings, there's nothing wrong with that. But to unlock the full capabilities of your Sony ZV1, you are going to be wanting to shoot in manual exposure. So first things first, switch on your camera, so I already have. And next step will be pressing the mode button, which is on the side of the on and off switch. And you are going to be wanting to go to the M icon over here, which stands for manual exposure. So this will give us full control over the camera settings while we take photos. So just press the middle button over here. And next we are going to press the menu button, which is this one over here. So first things first, file format. So there are three choices to choose from. First thing is RAW, next is RAW and JPEG, last is JPEG. So JPEG, I think all of you guys know what this is. This is the most basic file format for photos, which is okay, it's decent, but if you want the most flexibility when it comes to editing your photos, you're going to be wanting to shoot RAW. And I don't want you to be on RAW and JPEG as well, because when you snap a photo, it's going to save both a RAW file and a JPEG file. And you don't want that, it's going to eat up too much of your space. So just click RAW. So for aspect ratio, there are 4 selections over here. If you want to take advantage of the full width of your sensor, you are going to be wanting to shoot 3x2. So let's hit OK. And now we are going to navigate to page number 2 out of 12 by pressing right. And there's only one thing we're going to adjust here, which is long exposure noise reduction. I want you to switch that off because sometimes the camera settings will, or the camera sensor will do weird stuff whenever you're shooting, wherein it will just create banding in your photos, and you don't want that. So just press off. And we're going to go to page number 3. So here we have some settings that we're going to touch, which is just drive mode. So this is something that you are going to touch if you want to adjust how fast the shutter will be shooting, or how many times the shutter will be actuating. So for just shooting portraits, you're going to be okay with just single shooting. But if you want to shoot sports, like maybe skateboarding or basketball, you can shoot in continuous shooting mode. So there are different settings like mid, low, and high. So it will do like a fast burst of photos. But if for portraits, you can just leave it on single shooting. Now we're going to go to page number 5. So for focus mode, we are going to set it on AF-C, which stands for continuous autofocus. So this will allow you to take advantage of Sony's famous face detect autofocus, which is one of the best autofocus systems in the game right now. So we're going to hit OK. And next one is focus area. So this is where it gets tricky, because depending on what you're filming, this may vary. So center is something popular for other people who like to shoot wherein they want a subject dead center. So let's pretend that I press OK. And then if anything I press in that small box over there, and I focus, it's going to set focus right there. Whatever is on the center is going to focus on that thing, which is good if your subject is on the center most of the time. But my favorite focus area is wide. So whatever is closest to the lens, it will focus on that thing. So let's pretend I put this over here. If I press the shutter, it's going to focus on that, even though it's not on the center. If I remove it, it's going to click back to that deck of cards over there, which is on the center. So yeah, that is focus area. So here there is another setting like face and eye autofocus settings. So for face and eye priority, I always set it on. This will allow you to put a small box on the subject's eye. Subject detection, of course you're going to set it on human, but if you want to film your pets like your dogs or your cats, of course you can set it on animal as well. But for standard portraits, just leave it on human. So for right or left eye select, I just leave it on auto, because sometimes your subject will be maybe tilting their head to the right or to the left. So depending on where they're facing, yeah, it's going to be like that. So for face eye frame display, it's the small box on the eye. So you're going to want that on to make sure that you are actually focusing on the eye. And animal eye display, I just leave it on just in case I do have to film some animals, like a dog or something. So press menu again to go back. So for the other settings, we are not really going to touch them, like pre-autofocus. We're just going to leave it like that. Focus frame color, white is okay. But so we're going to skip to page 7, which has one of the most important settings that we are going to be adjusting. And no, it is not the ISO or ND filter. Do not ever touch ND filter when you're shooting photos. This is mainly for videography. So metering mode is the thing that we are going to be touching here. So you want the multi-metering mode switched on. You don't want it to be on center, standard, and entire screen average, or highlight. You want it to be on multi-metering, which you can take advantage of this over here, which stands for multi-metering. So depending on where your subject is or how you exposed for the subject, you always want your to be on 0 most of the time. So sometimes it will vary, but yeah, for most of the time, plus 0.0. So face priority in multi-metering is another thing you want to be on. So it will actually set the metering for people in the frame. So anybody who has a face will be detected by the multi-metering, which is good. It will help you when it comes to exposing properly. So on page 8, we're not going to touch this because we don't have a flash on the ZV1. So here on page 9, there are a lot of important settings that we can adjust to help us with our photography. So you can see white balance over here, which is how your whites will be looking white in your shot. So right now it is on auto white balance, which the camera will decide what white balance it wants based on the current situation. But if you want it to be on manual, you can either choose daylight if you're outdoors, shade, cloudy, incandescent, but most of the time you are going to be wanting to be on Kelvin temperature, which is the C temp filter over here. So you can rotate the dial depending on how cold you want the shot or warm you want it. So since I'm indoors right now and I'm using like a fluorescent bulb, which is around 5600K, I'm going to be setting it maybe around 5400, which the deck of cards over here, this is white, right? You want that to look white. So 5400 is good enough, so I'm going to hit OK. And for priority set in auto white balance, I just leave it on standard. DRO or auto HDR, you want that to be off, because sometimes the dynamic range optimizer will do weird stuff when you take photos. I suggest you just leave it on off and boost your shadows manually because we're already shooting raw, right? For creative style, we just leave it on standard. For picture profile, we do not touch that because that is more for video. So on page 12 over here, we have just some ways to actuate the shutter automatically, like maybe a smile shutter. If you press this, anybody who smiles in the shot, the camera will take a shot. And on self-portrait timer, if you want to switch this on, the camera will just do like a countdown, and once you press the shutter, it's going to maybe do 10 seconds or 5 seconds, and then it will take a shot. So if you do want to take a selfie with a group, that's one way to do it. So there are just a few settings that here we can adjust based on the situation we are in. So shutter speed is this one over here, which is 1/125. So you are going to increase that number the faster your subject is moving. But for this case, since I'm just filming or shooting a deck of cards which is not moving and I'm on a tripod, I can just decrease that. So notice what happens. It brightens the image, right? Because the shutter is now going to shut itself slower. Like it's going to actuate like a little bit slower than normal. But if your subject is moving, let's pretend a person. The safest shutter would be around, I think, 160 and 200. If you can control the person, like you can ask them, can you not move, and I'm going to snap a photo of you. When you tell them to smile, usually they'll just move their shoulders and maybe move their face. So 160 and 200 will be a good range. For aperture, 1.8 is a good thing to put it on, but that only works if you are on the widest focal length of this ZV1, which is 24mm. So since the ZV1 is a variable aperture lens, the moment you zoom in, it's going to go from 1.8 to 2.8 over here. So it can't keep 1.8. So next thing is multimetering. You want that to be most of the time at 0.0. So if I decrease my ISO, you're going to see it goes to -7, which means it is not properly exposed. You can also look at the histograms, like those spikes over there. You want those to be in the center. So I'm going to increase my ISO to maybe 400. It is now on plus 0.0, which is what you want. So yeah, like what I said, shutter speed, aperture, ISO will vary depending on your situation. So wherever you are, it will vary. So that's it for me, guys. That was just a quick tutorial on how to set up your Sony ZV1 for photography. If you have any further questions, feel free to leave me down a comment down below and I'll help you guys out. So as always, see you guys next time. Peace.